I got unexpectedly addicted to the Dune Awakening preview. Over 3 days, I put in over 20 hours and I couldn't get enough until I was out of content. I fully expected this game to be a low-effort cash grab to capitalize on the hype surrounding the movies. Obviously, they're using the movies to propel the game forward. I won't argue against that. But the effort is there, and this game is extremely fun on its own merits. While it's advertised as a multiplayer game, I played it almost exclusively solo, and I'll touch on that later, but I enjoyed it nevertheless. This is going to be one of the surprises of the year for me. I want to preface that I'm a new Dune fan. Like probably many others, Dune Part 2 turned me into a devout follower of the Lisan al-Gaib. I liked the first part, but the second part elevated the series to S tier, and I feel lucky to have experienced it in theaters. When they announced Dune Awakening, it just felt like Funcom was trying to seize the moment and use fans' excitement to make some money. I didn't anticipate they would actually make a banger. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. I ran into several frustrating bugs and performance issues, but the core of the game is an incredibly fun time for fans of the survival genre, and new or old fans of Dune. I'm excited to play this with friends. I was originally invited to play this with another creator, Mug Thief, but due to scheduling conflicts and us living across the Atlantic from each other, it didn't work out. But regardless, go check him out, he's awesome. Dune Awakening takes place in an alternate timeline where Paul Atreides was never born. Instead, his mother gave birth to a girl. The Atreides survive the siege of Arrakeen, and the Fremen disappear into the desert. The player character is tasked with discovering what happened to the Fremen. Although it's all taking place in a desert, the game can be downright gorgeous at times. Seeing a worm breach the sand in the distance with a giant moon illuminating the sky is truly unique, and I stopped to watch the environment around me on more than a few occasions. In the character creator, you will choose your starting skill tree, and they correspond to various schools like the Bene Gesserit, the Mentats, Troopers, Planetologists, and Swordmasters. I started with the Bene Gesserit tree, and it gave me the Bendu Sprint ability to start. You're going to have to suspend canon a little bit to allow male characters into the Bene Gesserit, but I think it's pretty cool how they've handled the skills. Each tree you didn't start with will be scattered throughout the world for you to discover through various quest lines. The second tree I found was the Trooper tree, which gave me the grapple. I was ecstatic to figure out how to use this thing to traverse the landscape. Combining it with a suspensor belt let me quickly scale large rock formations and get around with style. The movement in general is really enjoyable. You can also combine the suspensors with the Bendu Sprint to launch yourself across the desert. The survival mechanics are pretty well done from my perspective. The environment is as much of an enemy as it is a companion. Water is absolutely precious, and you'll spend the first several hours figuring out how to obtain water just so you can stay alive. The desert is unforgiving, and if you stay in the sun for too long, you will get sunstroke, which just makes you even more desperate for water. You can harvest water from your enemy's blood, and that will hold you over until you figure out how to siphon it from plants. I thought it was a neat detail that you can only get water from these plants at and before dawn, otherwise the plants dry up. You might be thinking, how much fun can it be to explore a desert? And that's what I was asking. To my surprise, it's honestly a lot more fun than I expected. There's a ton of caves and research stations littered throughout the world, filled with unique items and enemies. You'll find audio logs and lore scattered about. You'll find NPCs that will take you on quest lines to teach you new skills. And on top of all that, there's 3 built-in radio stations, kind of like Fallout, that you can tune into at any time while exploring to listen to music, news around the desert, and faction propaganda. Worms are, of course, a huge threat on the open sand. You might have noticed that they look different from the worms in the recent movies. At least I did. But they're actually closer to how they were depicted in old Dune media. Like this cover of Dune by illustrator John Schoner, where they have 3 triangular lobes that form their mouth. These things are absolutely terrifying because getting eaten by a worm causes you to lose every piece of gear on you. Normally, when you die, you have a chance to get your things back from the spot where you died, but not with the worms. Everything is gone. The first time this happened to me was heartbreaking. I tempted fate and lost about an hour of progress. It was frustrating to say the least, but I think this is a great mechanic for the game. When walking or driving on open sand, you'll notice a sound meter that will indicate how much aggro you're generating. After a certain point, a worm will breach nearby and you'll have a limited amount of time to get to solid ground before it gets to you. It keeps you on your toes, and I imagine with things like the ornithopter, it will get easier to cross the desert and avoid the worms altogether. Base building is pretty intuitive, if not a little clunky at first, especially with a controller. Honestly, the whole game is clunky with a controller, and I hope they improve controller implementation. I used almost exclusively mouse and keyboard after the first hour because it was just a whole lot less cumbersome. Anyways, base building uses snap point building, and it's not revolutionizing anything, but it gets the job done. I want to note that you shouldn't get too attached to your first base because the game will quickly ask you to abandon it. You can reclaim it, but the game is trying to encourage you to move further into the desert from where you started, and I think that's a good plan since crossing back and forth over the desert puts you at a huge risk with the worms. The construction tool lets you put down a layout of your buildings with projections for how you want the base to look before committing materials to it. Once a projection is laid down, you or your friends can contribute to completing it. There's also a tool to copy blueprints from other people's builds and recreate them, but I didn't get to test this. Questing will have you going around the desert in search of signs for the Fremen, and it won't be long before you find something. At first, quest markers will point you to where you need to go, but this will not always be the case. Sometimes it will give you a hint and a picture of the area that it's in. It's up to you to figure out how exactly to get where you're going. I didn't find this rather difficult, but I did find it more fun than following markers from point A to point B. The only vehicle we had access to in the beta was the Sandbike. I wish we could have played with the ornithopter, but they wanted to keep all of the late game stuff unobtainable. Regardless, the Sandbike was a good introduction to the vehicles and vehicle assembly, which has you installing and maintaining each part of the vehicle. I really liked that you could summon the Sandbike almost anywhere, and being on it prevented getting sunstroke, which I kind of abused in places where I couldn't find shade, like on the top of a mountain. They did let us upgrade the Sandbike, and there was a noticeable difference in handling and speed from each version. Combat is one area I find to be a little bit lacking in the game, but we only had access to the early parts of the game, so the true depth of the combat isn't yet revealed. I don't want to give the impression that combat is terrible. For a survival game, I thought it was okay. It just won't compare to a true action game, and people unfortunately shouldn't expect it to. I actually found it incredibly punishing before you get your first shield. Enemies will chew through your health like butter, and if you're not careful, you will get overrun fast. I found the progression from getting destroyed to doing the destroying to be satisfying, and I appreciated how it felt like I was getting more powerful. One thing I felt was strange though from the beta was how I almost never ran into other players. I saw structures that people built, but I only saw other players in the starting area. Was it just because it was a limited closed beta? Maybe, but it'll be interesting to see it on release. It was originally billed as an MMO, but their marketing has shifted to call it a multiplayer survival game on a massive scale. It doesn't quite seem like an MMO, at least not yet. There's still a lot of unknowns with this game, which could bring a lot of this stuff together to make a great full package. Endgame is a big question mark right now. After the main story, there will be a big open zone called the Deep Desert. This is where PvP will be a big part of the gameplay, with factions fighting for the control of spice. The Landsraad is the endgame mechanic by which factions compete for control of neutral objectives, and the winner each cycle gets to select a new policy for their world or server. What these policies will be is still unknown. We'll also have social hubs, advanced vehicles like the ornithopters, advanced combat with more abilities and smarter AI, and advanced social features like the exchange, which sounds like a trading post. All these features together sound awesome to me, but we'll have to wait and see. The closed beta was so much more fun than I ever expected it to be, and I'm very hopeful for this game's future. If you have reservations like I did, I highly encourage you to try to get into the beta that starts on May 9th. You can get access by joining the official Funcom stream on May 10th, signing up for the beta on the Funcom website, or signing up for the playtest on Steam. Everything up to this point in the video was recorded about 24 hours after finishing the available content in the preview. It's now about 2 weeks later. This game had some kind of spell on me for a few days. I could not get enough, and I think that says a lot about the fun factor of the game. But after sitting on it for a few weeks and also exploring a few other survival games, the lack of it feeling like an MMO on top of the mediocre combat have made me a little more concerned about how complete of an experience this game will be. I think the excitement of being in the Dune universe made me forgive some of its shortcomings. It's going to be a fun Dune game for Dune fans, but can it stand on its own? Many survival games have a similar, if not better, formula, so if the multiplayer experience isn't worth it, then it will be a hard sell for non-Dune fans, or just anyone in general. I'm still excited, but I'm not as gung-ho about the game as I was at first. If you're excited for it, I'd love to hear it, so let me know in the comments.